I kept hearing about this as that game with lesbians, so of course I wound up playing it. I won't use a number, and today we're looking at Nights of Azure. In the world of Nights of Azure, an evil being of immense power known as the Night Lord was temporarily killed and sealed away by an army of holy knights and the first saint. As his blue blood rained down upon the world, it tainted and corrupted everything it touched. Humans, animals, and even objects became fiends, and demons arose as well, all of which served the will of the night. Our protagonist is Arnis, a half-demon holy knight-to-be who's been tasked with protecting the next saint, her close friend, Lilise. So she is not killed before she can sacrifice herself to stave off the return of the Night Lord. Due to Arnis's feelings for Lilise, she often tries to convince her to give up on being the next saint, or tries to find alternative ways of stopping the Night Lord. I am absolutely in love with the lore of this game. The world that has been created here is one that has a lot of potential, and I hope to see it again in a sequel of some kind. Unfortunately, this game has a number of issues that hold it back pretty hard. At its core, this is a Dynasty Warriors game, and I'm sure that's already turned some of you away. Dynasty Warriors games, and Musos in general, tend to be very simplistic on a mechanical level, and this game is no exception. Just like every other Dynasty Warriors game, you have a light attack and a heavy attack. Pressing the light attack repeatedly gives you a combo, and every other combo is done by ending that light attack combo early with a heavy attack. There's also a special attack that uses some of your SP bar. Most Dynasty Warriors games make up for a lack of combat depth by providing you with a large number of characters and weapons. So while they are each easy to learn on their own, there's a lot of them and you end up with quite a bit at your disposal. Arnis is the only playable character in Nights of Azure, and she has 5 weapons, one of which doesn't even have combos. It's just like a Mega Buster gun bow thing with 2 types of shots. To be fair, there are some mechanics unique to Nights of Azure compared to other Dynasty Warriors games. There are servants, which are fiends Arnis is bound to her service by bringing them to life in a specific ritualistic way. This will in essence give you access to 4 summons that you have a very limited amount of control over, along with a unique special attack that you can activate on each one, that each has its own regenerating special bar. The other large addition to Arnis's arsenal is her transformations. Standard video game stuff here for this. Fill up a bar and you can change into a stronger form for a limited time. There's a total of 5 of them. Each has 2 primary attacks and a special move. Nothing too complex or groundbreaking there, just a bit more at her disposal than a typical Dynasty Warriors character. Point is, I would have liked to have seen more, like if each transformation had its own set of combos, or there was another button to interweave into various slightly more complicated combos, just to name a few examples. To be honest, it wouldn't even be relevant for most of the game anyway, because it's laughably easy. I found almost no challenge in anything except the final 2 bosses in the main game and the post-game. That post-game will probably kick your ass a bit, which is refreshing compared to the rest of it. Even though most of the game wasn't difficult, I did feel like new enemy types were being thrown at me pretty consistently. I liked most of the enemy designs in this game. Some of them are just okay, but others I found to be rather distinctive, especially the final boss, and Arnis's design is really nice as well. Also, as your servants level up, their designs change, mostly just like color changes or new armor or something like that. But it was a nice way of making me feel like I was making progress in that respect, and I wish more games would do something like that. This game actually has lore for how Arnis becomes more powerful when you level up, which is something I appreciate. Essentially, when you collect enough blue blood from enemies, you can make a blood sacrifice that improves Arnis's strength, but also pushes her ever closer to becoming a full-fledged demon and losing who she is. Also, you get the opportunity to ask a series of questions about this world. Considering the lore was one of my favorite bits of this game, I liked that. The level design is just okay. Each level is fairly linear, with an occasional branch off with some extra loot, and pretty regularly walls will pop up that require you to defeat all the enemies to progress, because this is a video game, I guess. I found myself really liking the music. The battle tracks in particular got me weirdly pumped up. I guess that's just more of the game's Dynasty Warriors colors showing. Sadly, this game has a lot of technical issues, like to the point that there are pretty regular frame rate dips. It's not the end of the world, especially because it's not too challenging in the first place, but for fuck's sake, the models aren't even that graphically impressive, and there's never a crazy amount happening on screen. It shouldn't be too much to ask that the frame rate is consistent, at least most of the time. Speaking of the models, they're a bit weird. Like, they look fine on their own, but the transitions between most animations in each model's idle pose seemed very awkward, as if they were snapping back to how they were before each animation started. I don't know if anyone else will even notice what I'm talking about, but it bugged me pretty consistently. Also, there is a perpetual boob jiggle, which is as terrifying as it was in Dead or Alive. The weirdest issues I had are related to the tone of the story. It feels very inconsistent. Everything about the world of Nights of Azure implies something serious and rather grim, but the characters are more often than not super cheery and engage in wacky anime hijinks. On its own, that combination isn't inherently bad, but the execution here felt jarring. Just as characters finish discussing something incredibly serious, there's a scene of a guy failing to hit on Arnis, or us seeing Lilise being a horrifyingly bad cook. On one level, those scenes worked because I wound up liking pretty much all of the characters, but on another it damaged the story overall because I never wound up feeling like the events going on in the story were deeply affecting the characters. And trust me, they probably should have been. Now, for what everyone, or at least I, have really been waiting for. Let's talk about Yuri. Arnis and Lilise are about as canon as they can be without actually being canon. Goddamn mountains of evidence are thrown at you that there's something going on between them, to the point that they often sleep in the same bed together, but it still somehow felt like the writers were dancing around the subject, unwilling to commit to there actually being something explicitly romantic between Arnis and Lilise. If you're interested in Yuri, I'm sure you've seen this kind of stuff before. Shit like the girls seemingly starting to be in a very close relationship, but then insisting on calling each other friends. You know, gal pals. There's this weird obsession in a lot of fiction with maintaining some kind of arbitrary, plausible deniability to two same-sex people actually being romantically attracted to each other. Sure, they seem to have feelings for each other, and you can certainly ship them with each other, and you know what? In most contexts, that can actually wind up being fine, because the story's focus is somewhere else, and then people like me can be happy that they have evidence to support a fictional romantic pairing, and everyone else can just move on with their lives. But here, it pissed me off, and it completely comes down to presentation and execution. One of the main conflicts of the story is centered on Arnis's feelings for Lilise. For Madoka's sake, the ending you get is determined by Arnis's relationship level with Lilise, which is determined by various dialogue choices throughout the game, but whatever. Regardless of what ending you get, they never really show clear evidence that the girls are romantically interested in each other. The most annoying thing about this is that I have to think that they know what they're doing here. This isn't me in the corner with some nonsensical pairing while the writers were thinking that it was clearly just friendship. Look up the trailer. Look at the art in the game. The clearest evidence comes from Lilise's name. Some of you may know that the word Lily translates to the Japanese word Yuri. And whenever one of the Japanese voice actors says her name, they say it as Yurise. One of the main characters has the word Yuri in her name. Let me just clarify here. I didn't want the girls to wind up having hardcore sex. If I wanted to watch porn, I would. It's not hard to find. As nice as it might be, I don't expect all of my romantic pairings, be they straight, gay, or whatever the fuck, to become canon. And I don't necessarily need lesbians in every piece of media. That would be just as obnoxious as every male and female lead in almost every fucking movie hooking up in some way by the end, even when they don't really seem that into each other. But gosh, we'd never have to deal with that, would we? The point is, I got really annoyed seeing them pander to Yuri tropes as one of the main things throughout the whole fucking story, but then never have that go anywhere meaningful. All of that said, if you enjoy Yuri, and you know what to expect in that respect going into this game, you'll probably be able to enjoy that aspect of the story. But it still fucking pisses me off. Despite all of the other complaints I have about this game, I wound up having quite a bit of fun with it. Maybe it appealed to me in a bunch of weird ways that only really make sense to me, or it somehow wound up being a guilty pleasure of mine, or something. While I can't outright recommend it to everyone, I will say that it might be worth looking into picking up a used copy a bit later down the line when the game is cheaper. Oh, a few other things. There's only Japanese dialogue with English subtitles in this game, so keep that in mind. And there is a canon true ending, which you get by finishing all of the post-game story stuff, then beating the final boss again. So be sure to load your initial clear save data if you do decide to play this game. That said, this has been I Won't Use a Number. If you like this video, you can subscribe and maybe share it with your friends. Keep loving what you love, and I'll see you next time with something else.